Well, let's try this a second time. F.E.A.R may be one of the most revolutionary FPSs ever made. You play as Point Man. Yes, that's your name. You are part of a unit known as First Encounter Assault Recon, also known as F.E.A.R. Roll credits. Being new to the unit, it's known pretty early on that you seem to have almost inhuman reflexes. It seems that there was a secret program where there's this huge army of super soldiers that are controlled by a psionic commander. There's no way this could go wrong, right? Well, guess what? Everything goes wrong when the psionic commander named Pax and F.E.A.R gets possessed by a girl who activates all the super soldiers to kill the program's scientists and workers. As Point Man, you must go in and deal with F.E.A.R, but along the way, learn the origination of the program. Now, F.E.A.R really hammers in intense and exhilarating combat where it feels like you are working to outsmart the enemy. The game is like your usual FPS, except one thing that the creators wanted to focus on was clutter. When you're in firefights, it's always in offices, warehouses, or even labs. To make the fights more chaotic, they added clutter. Items on shelves, tables, walls will explode in the air, creating this feeling of power and weapons. But there's one system that specializes in the cinematic part of fighting. Welcome to Point Man's specialty, slow down time. Now, as I've said already, one thing about Point Man that's identified early on is that Point Man has inhuman reflexes.
You've seen his training results. His reflexes are totally off the charts. I think he can handle it.
You can activate your reflexes to slow down time while you move in real time. The great part is seeing the bullet trails and the waves of explosions, and seeing all the clutter of paper, debris, guns, and even bodies. All slow motion flying in the room is especially pleasing. But when the fighting is done, you get to revel in the damage you've done. It's almost like you weren't the one that caused this chaos, and seeing all the chunks out of the wall from bullets, blood splatter, and even explosion marks makes a very satisfying end to combat. The resources you'll find are weapons, armor, and medkits. And to this day, I still think that F.E.A.R nailed the weapon sounds. F.E.A.R has weapons ranging from the simple handgun to a sniper rifle that turns enemies into bare skeletons. Now, every weapon sounded powerful, especially the shotgun and the heavy assault rifle. Oh yeah, you can dual-wield pistols and the SMGs also. Another cool weapon was the penetrator, able to nail enemies to the wall. The shotgun could even turn red enemies into a red cloud of mist. Now, throughout the game, you'll find your armor and medkits. But the one thing you really want to keep your eye out for are the boosters. There are two types of boosters, the reflex and health booster. They are usually in areas that require a bit more exploration to find, but can be often seen via the glow of vials in them. Green for reflex and blue for health. Usually these are in areas that require you to brave the dark. Now, what makes F.E.A.R truly ahead of its time was the enemies. These super soldiers are called replicas. Replicas feel like normal enemies, except for the fact that they communicate with one another. There is a constant flow of comms that the enemies say in combat. This can range from them telling the others where your position is, to them even swearing when they realize they are the last one. Now, one big thing about F.E.A.R is, well, anytime you get teammates, don't expect them to see them too long. They will almost immediately die. The game introduces new types of replica soldiers in unique ways, and there are two perfect examples of this. First, as you're walking and continuing your slaughter, you can hear enemies preparing a breach, and when they do, you are introduced to the heavy armor replica. This enemy is heavily armed with the weapon that fires steel bolts. This guy makes an excellent entrance and furthermore can be easily identified on the field by its four blue glowing eyes. Secondly, my personal favorite, the replica assassin. The assassin is introduced in the office building. This is accompanied by an eerie silence that's almost deafening. These guys focus on surgical strikes to hit you and run. The assassin can even turn invisible and hang on walls. I will say, seeing ceiling panels and objects being moved around by their sudden movements is ominous as hell. The way that they are introduced with the bodies in the ceilings or people killed in a brutal way is a nice touch as well. Now, pretty rarely you will encounter actual human enemies called the ATC. These guys fight pretty identically to replicas, except their health is way less, and their human reactions make them way different. For example, their screams. F.E.A.R. always specialized in being a horror FPS. The game's pacing is so amazing that it's hard to guess whether the next area would be a combat or a horror type of area. The way F.E.A.R. handled horror was mainly through lighting and ambience. For being introduced in 2005, it has an incredible lighting system. There's a lot of these moments where there's a light source like a lamp is swinging, and seeing the shadows change was always something commendable. But one thing that I always recall from F.E.A.R. was the office computers. Seeing a dark room with only the glow of a computer screen always stuck with me, whether it was because it was ominous or had the assassins usually near him. One of the biggest components of horror in F.E.A.R. was Alma herself, the girl in the red dress. She seems to follow you, but the part that always got to me was when in the offices you run into a F.E.A.R. team that is only bones. You are supposed to go into this hallway and jump over the rail to get to the next level, but in this atrium, if you look up, you see Alma just looking at you from the floor above. The first time I played F.E.A.R. and I thought I was supposed to use the elevator, but when I went to leave the elevator, seeing her caused me to shit myself. Oh yeah, one part that I noticed while editing this is that when the girl takes pictures of Alma, or the scene, her shadow is there. One thing I hear about F.E.A.R. all the time is the level design feels too identical, making it finding the right way difficult. However, I would disagree with that, as I think it adds to the game. The use of lighting to direct with players has been used in games forever. It's the same here, but in its own right, the opposite. Sometimes to go the right way, you have to tread the darkness. One of my favorite parts of F.E.A.R. is the almost unnoticeable level transitions. The one I can note the most is the offices you transition into a construction area for future offices. These subtle transitions are everywhere. The reason that F.E.A.R. is unique is due to the fact it was an FPS but mixed with horror elements. This game was an amazing mixture of immediately going from fast-paced action to a slow but nerve-wracking darkness. F.E.A.R. came out in 2005, around the same time as Star Wars Republic Commando, Halo Combat Evolved, and Call of Duty, and while these were good FPSs, they did not really interact with any other genres, especially that being of horror. What was your favorite part of F.E.A.R.? This game did strike enough chords to support 2 sequels, but maybe more on that in another video.